hope as of today, it is hard to find anyone who has not yet experienced some sort of AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini. However, have you ever felt frustrated because the AI chatbot you used did not provide you the expected output? Or did you feel like the model failed to identify the context you provided and gave you all sorts of random answers? This is because all these models are not actual or real intelligence but artificial intelligence. It is you who has to provide the necessary instructions and context for your conversation, which the AI chatbot is then able to follow. Even though you can provide detailed instructions on your own, in this video, I am going to walk you through some tactics to help you provide accurate prompts to get your work done smarter. So let's get started. The first important principle is context isolation. For different contexts, you should ideally have different conversations. For instance, if in one conversation you ask the GPT model to write a professional summary based on your resume, and if you want to analyze a financial report, the second task should go in a new conversation. Since the GPT model maintains context of each conversation in its memory and uses the same to infer responses, if you use the same conversation for both these tasks, the GPT model would try to include facts from your resume into the financial analysis report. This is not what you would expect. So it is essential to use different conversations for different contexts for context isolation. The second important principle is that you need to provide clear and specific instructions in order to get a more meaningful response from a GPT model. The first aspect under this is that long, detailed prompts are preferred over short prompts because that allows us to provide additional context to the GPT model. In this example, if you give the short prompt, the GPT model would give either no reason to reject the offer or give a random reason to reject it, such as pursuing another offer. But if you provide a reason to reject the offer, it would include that in the drafted email. The next important aspect in clear and specific instructions is using delimiters. They clearly indicate to the GPT model what specific text in the prompt that we want the GPT model to consider for further processing. There are different delimiters we could use to separate those important texts from the rest of the prompt. For instance, we could ask the GPT model to generate a LinkedIn headline for us based on our resume that we provide between backticks. This guides the model on where to specifically focus. Additionally, if you are a developer and if your application takes user input to construct a prompt, this can avoid situations of prompt injections. For instance, if your application performs summarizing user input, then a malintent user could provide a text like the following to misguide your application. Though these simple prompt injections are generally detected and ignored by modern GPT models, it is a best practice to properly delimit them for better security. The next aspect is to ask for structured formatted output. For instance, if you are a non-developer, you could ask to format the output into 3 paragraphs with 4 sentences in each paragraph. If you are a developer, you could ask to generate some mock data for testing with values for username, email, and password in JSON format. Another important aspect of clear and specific instructions is to validate conditions and assumptions as part of your prompt. For instance, you can ask the model to check if a given content is a resume, cover letter, or report and take actions accordingly. This will guide the model to branch out its actions similar to a tree algorithm. The next aspect of clear and specific instructions is to provide some examples of the input and output and let the model understand your expectations. Though a little cumbersome, you can obtain a more satisfactory output from your model. The final aspect in this is role play. Here you ask the model to act in a particular role and do the writing. You could ask the model to assume the role of a professional resume writer, professional financial analyst, or a scientific writer, etc., as your need may be. The third important principle of prompt engineering is giving the model time to think. This is usually applied to more complex and time consuming work that we assign to models. Similar to humans, if you don't allow enough time for the models to work out its solution, it could produce an incorrect result. The first aspect of this is to provide small steps for the model to derive the final answer. In this simple example, instead of asking the model to generate the French opposites in a single attempt, we have divided it into two steps for the model to first translate to French and then to generate the opposites. Even though modern models can do these two simple steps in a single go, the decomposition of steps can be really helpful for more complex tasks to let the model understand the context and follow along the steps, reducing the possibility of errors. The next aspect is to allow the model to work out a solution to a complex problem on its own before arriving at a conclusion. This will give the model the time it requires to work out the solution and make correct judgment on another answer. Despite all important uses of GPT models, they suffer from a significant drawback called hallucinations. These are actually made up facts by GPT models which are not actually true. However, compared to earlier GPT models, newer models have very small chances of hallucinations. Yet there could be certain very minor cases of hallucinations, and that is why you need to verify the contents generated by GPT models yourself for accuracy. This concludes our discussion on prompt engineering, and I hope you found some value. I highly recommend the free course ChatGPT Prompt Engineering for Developers at deeplearning.ai by Isa Falford and Andrew Ng. If you like this content, please like, share, comment and subscribe for similar content. Please comment on what topics you would like to learn next. Hope to see you in another video. Until then, have a good time.